Hello friends, and welcome back to another episode where we discuss the darkest and most disturbing stories of the Bible. Now, last time I told you the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and the destruction thereof, a story which most people are familiar with. And just in case you haven't heard that story, I encourage you to go back and watch that last video. Get yourself familiar because you're going to need it in order to really appreciate this one. Okay, well, since you're ready to go on, I'm going to introduce you to the Sodom and Gomorrah story's evil twin. That's right. I bet you didn't know that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah had an evil twin hidden in the back recesses of the book of Judges. Well, it does, and I'm going to acquaint you with it. You might picture the Sodom and Gomorrah story as like Mr. Rogers, and the story I'm going to share with you tonight is more like Jeffrey Dahmer. They're both kind of creepy from a distance, but when you get up close, one is far worse than the other. Well, before I step into this story, which I am entitling The Levite and the Concubine, a story in 12 pieces, I need to give you some background, some historical context. There's a lot been happening in history since Father Abraham and Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction. There's been the birth of a nation, the Israelites, who have gone on down to Egypt and spent 400 years there, followed by 40 years of wandering in the wilderness and taking possession of the promised land with the help of Moses and Joshua. Since settling the land of Canaan, life has not been kind to the Israelites. Being bereft of strong leaders like Moses and Joshua, they have fragmented into small clans, loosely affiliated by tribe. And they are still surrounded by the Canaanites, who they've hitherto failed to drive out. And they are trapped, that is, the Israelites are trapped in a perpetual cycle of disobedience to God, and God getting angry and sending said Canaanites in to beat them up and demoralize them, until Israel cries out to God for forgiveness and mercy, and then God raises up a local leader called a judge, who then straightens the Israelites out and leads them to victory against their Canaanite oppressors, and things calm down for a little bit. And this happens over and over and over again in clan after group, until the time of our story in Judges chapter 19, Israel is a moral disaster, and God is all but absent from the affairs of Israel. So, we enter our story with a man from the tribe of Levi. Now, Levi is one of the 12 tribes of Israel, set apart by God for the worship of God and the service of God, for sacrifices, for purification rituals, care of the tabernacle, and so on and so forth. So, to speak anachronistically, this man is a man of the cloth, a holy man. And today he's on his way south, traveling to a town called Bethlehem. But he's not on a pilgrimage to explore the future birthplace of a couple of messiahs. He's there to collect his wayward wife. According to Judges chapter 19, verse 2, his wife, who was actually not a wife at all, but a concubine, played the harlot on this man from Levi and ran off to go live with her father. And after 4 months of celibacy, our hero, the Levite, decides he's had enough of a cold bed and goes down to collect her, to persuade her to come back and live with him. Now, plant a flag here. A concubine is not quite a wife, as I said. A concubine is like a wife, in that she has all the duties and responsibilities of a wife, but none of the rights and privileges of a wife. She is a glorified sex slave. Okay, so our Levite friend must have the gift of gab, because he gets down to her father's house. He and his father-in-law get along like a house afire. The old man invites him to stay with him 3 days, during which I guess he's able to sweet-talk his concubine into coming back home with him. And even after 3 days, Dad is hard-pressed to let him go. He keeps saying things like, "Now, y'all don't want to head off down the road on an empty stomach. Y'all come back inside and have breakfast, and after breakfast you can all travel." Well, so morning becomes afternoon, and Our hero says, "Now I really must be going. Yom Kippur is coming up in 2 weeks, and I have a bull and a ram to purchase. I really must be getting ready." And Pops will say something like, "Now I got a 10-year-old bottle of Kentucky bourbon cooling in the well." Well, I suppose Yom Kippur is still 2 weeks off. What the heck? And so on in they'd go, and they'd drink their libations and enjoy themselves. Well, this happens both on the 4th day and then on 5th day. He persuades the Levite to stick around for breakfast in the afternoon. And then finally, the Levite will not be put off any longer. He says, No, I'm a very important man in Shiloh. I really must go." And besides that, the Kentucky bourbon is gone. And so off he goes. Well, sunset is fast approaching. They haven't gone far when they reach a town called Jebus, which is the future Jerusalem. Unfortunately, the town is still under Canaanite control. Jebus will not become Jerusalem until King David, many years in the future. The servant of the Levite's getting a little nervous. He looks up at the sky and says, "Boss, it's getting high time to evening. We're still out on the road and these bandits out here. Hey, I got kinfolk in Jebus. Why don't we go on yonder and look them up? They'll put us up in a clean room." And the Levite says something to the effect of, "Oh, dear God, boy, no. I wouldn't dare go into the presence of the Canaanites. Haven't you ever heard of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? There's a Benjamite city just up ahead. It's called Gibeah. They are my countrymen, and they will treat us with the hospitality and dignity befitting of an Israelite." And so on they go to Gibeah of Benjamin. Well, our Levite friend is about to find that time and people have changed somewhat since the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, because when he enters town, near dark, he finds the streets ominously quiet and his kinfolk disturbingly unfriendly. So he makes his way to the town square, where apparently all strangers camp for the night and await someone to take pity on them and take them in, and no one does. Not until an old man comes down the road, gritty and dirty from his day's field work. He looks up and down and says, "Where are you fellas from? Where are you people going?" And the Levite says, "We're on business from Bethlehem, and we're on our way to the house of God." "Well, house of God or not, you don't want to stay out here in the city square. You fellers come on in and get in the house with me." The Benjamite says, and the Levite says, "Oh no, we're fine. We've got fodder for our animals and straw plenty." The old man says, "I got a jug of moonshine cooling in the cellar." And the Levite says, "Oh, I dare say I could use a nightcap." So on back to the house they go. Well, they're around the dinner table. They've just had supper, and they are in repose, when there's a banging at the door. Now, this story ought to be sounding pretty familiar to you by now, right? This is the Sodom and Gomorrah story played out all over again. But there are some subtle changes here that are going to lead to a disturbing conclusion. The old man gets up, heads to the door, opens up, and you guessed it, there's a bunch of boys outside with buggery on the brain. The house is surrounded by a mob who says, "Hey, where's that fella you brought in with you tonight? Why don't you bring him on out so we can get to know him a little bit?" The old man is having none of it. Gainly he says, "You're going to keep your dirty mitts off my guests, you hear? Now listen, I got a virgin daughter inside and he's got a concubine. She ain't no virgin, but she's a looker. I'll bring 'em out to you and you can do with 'em whatever the hell you want, but you're not going to touch my guests, do you hear me?" Now, I don't know what the hell's wrong with these people, but apparently culture has not changed so much. It is still a grand overture to be willing to throw your womenfolk out under the bus, or to a mob as it were, for the sake of your honored guests. Unlike previous stories that are similar to this one, there is no angel or angels to intercede. These people are on their own. But thank goodness our hero, the Levite, is a fast thinker. He gets up and he grabs his concubine and he throws her out to the mob, shuts the door behind him. Unfortunately for this young woman, the mob is not so picky about who they choose to victimize, and so according to the text, they rape her all night long and abuse her. And her ordeal lasts until dawn, when they finally let her go, and she drags herself back to the house, where she collapses on the doorstep. And this is where our friend the Levite finds her the next morning, no doubt refreshed and ready for his journey. And he says to her the only words that we ever hear spoken between the two of them by saying, "Get up, let us be going." But she doesn't move. She is dead. And so he picks her up and throws her on the back of his donkey and takes her home, where he then takes a knife and cuts her into 12 pieces, and then express mails the body parts to the various heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, demanding recompense for his loss. Well, this is where our story pretty much ends. But before we close this video, I'd like to make a few points and offer a few humble observations. The first, and one of the reasons why I brought this to your attention in the first place, is to demonstrate that there are two Sodom and Gomorrah stories. They have almost the same characters who say almost the same things at almost the same time, and the structure is nearly identical. It is the same story, told for different purposes. The point of the Sodom and Gomorrah story seems to be, this is how the people of God should treat the stranger in their midst. This is how the Canaanite treats the stranger, with contempt and dishonor, and thus they are worthy of destruction. The point of the Levite and the concubine story seems to be, this is what happens when the people are unmoored from the law of God, and the Lord God departs from them. All manner of mayhem like this ensues. I'd also like to plant a flag here and speak for this young woman, for whom no one else seems to be willing to speak, in that I am hard-pressed to think that, far be it from me to gainsay what the scriptures say about committing adultery and playing the harlot, that in a day and age in which women had no rights, in which women had no access to financial resources on their own, the idea that she would leave this man and shack up with another man and then run off to her father stretches credulity a bit. Similarly, that her father would accept her back with this shame upon her is a little hard to believe. But more, that this Levite, who is on the payroll of God's legal department, would take this scandal upon himself by persuading her to come back to him is also difficult to believe. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, quoted by Paul and the writers of the New Testament, says that she was angry with him, and that's why she left. It doesn't say anything about playing the harlot or adultery. I think the best explanation for what happened between the two of them was that she got tired of the lout and his boorish behavior and left his sorry ass. Or the final point I would like to make here is, you can imagine there's a great deal of hand-wringing by modern Bible interpreters to try to preserve the goodness of God in a story like this. And I can't blame them, because God doesn't look very good by the end of Judges chapter 19. I'm going to read for you an example, and I want to leave it to you to decide whether or not the writers of this particular commentary make their point effectively. It's the introduction to the book of Judges in my beloved and tattered copy of the NIV Student Bible. And it reads as follows, quote, "The foreign invasions were no accident," Judges says. "They came from God just as surely as the heroic rescuers did. A pattern developed. God allowed suffering as a consequence of the Israelites' disobedience. When things grew really terrible, their attention would turn back to God. He would respond by sending a judge to rescue them. But soon they would fail again. The secret of Israel's survival was not then military heroes or guerrilla tactics. It was the persistent, unwearied love of God Himself. Though they forgot Him, He did not forget them. He gave innumerable new beginnings. Again and again He sent judges to rescue them. He would not let them go. God is the real hero of Judges." You be the judge. As far as I'm concerned, nobody gets to be the hero of this story. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, thanks for watching. And by all means, leave a comment, hit the like button, and stick around for the next episode. Lord willing, I'll see you in the next video.